If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. After a long time, I'm back on the air with you. Khalid Mohammed with you with the SDN episode for tonight. We've got our resident CIA expert, Agent 007, Jeff MD from Arizona. Tonight, we've got a lot to talk about. You're going to find I'm a little bit jumpy right now. We're monitoring everything going on in Syria. Syria is going through an absolute collapse. The Middle East has gone into a lot of problems, and we're going to go through a lot of it. Let's open this up really simple. The Middle East right now is in the middle of what looks like a number of regime change operations. Syria is moving against SDF, who the U.S. has pulled back support from. Tom Barak issued an open statement on his Twitter. On his X, saying that the SDF needs to either align and join the Syrian army, and that's Jolani's terrorist army, or they will have to face continued bombing. That is Tom Barak's open statement. We're really confused right now in terms of what is happening in Syria, because it looks very much like what happened in Afghanistan right before the Taliban took over, before the U.S. Withdrawal. And if that's the case, we are going to see a massive spread in what's going on in the Middle East. We know that 3 cities have already fallen to ISIS inside of Syria, where the ISIS flag has been raised. We have seen burqas being distributed in 3 different cities already. We are hearing that 4 more cities are also about to fall. The problem we've got right now, and I'm going to be really open about this, the problem we've got right now is that Syria is in a state of flux. And when we look at the problem in Iran as well, and we look at what's going on with Saudi Arabia and with the UAE, there is a massive power shift in the Middle East. And the power shift in the Middle East is being driven by the Turks. There's a huge, huge mess unfolding right now. And Jeff and I are going to do our best to try and walk you through it and try and connect some of the dots, because those dots connect to what's going on in the U.S. right now. The insurgency that started in the U.S., we're going to find that there are numerous connections between what's going on in the Middle East and what's happening right now in the U.S. I'm going to cite a couple things, and I want people to understand. If you understand how the CIA's regime change playbook works, it starts with civil unrest. And from civil unrest, it moves very quickly into a military conflict. Once that happens, you have lost control of your country. It's what they did in Iran. You saw the former Shah's son try and incite Iranians to come out on the street and overthrow the mullah regime, who we don't support at all. They need to be removed, but it needs to be a move done by the Iranian people themselves, not by external forces. What that has led to is now you've got Syria in a state of flux. That state of flux means that ISIS now has the ability to take control. Jolani himself has always been an ISIS commander. He has always been Al-Qaeda. We have not hidden that fact at all on any of our SDN broadcasts as to what his allegiances really are. I will go more into that over the next couple episodes, because there's a lot of things that we need to discuss that set up what we're talking about next. Syria right now is in an absolute collapse, right? I don't even think Jolani's in control anymore, to be very honest, because his own fighters are opening prison doors where SDF had control before. And ISIS fighters are being released, they're being given clothing. We have seen videos of commanders giving them instructions on where to go, giving them rides, telling them what weapons are. We don't know what's going to happen in Syria next. And the problem with what's going on in Syria, when you look at who's backing them, it creates issues for countries like Iraq, for Iran, and for other countries in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. There's a lot here. Jeff, I'm gonna open the mic up to you and let you throw in your thoughts. I know you haven't been following Syria very closely, but your background in understanding what CIA regime change looks like, does this look like a massive regime change operation in the Middle East?
It's really hard to say because you don't, when you do a regime change, you don't say, hey, we're doing regime change, unless it's you're invading somebody for regime change. I don't know enough about what's actually going on the ground there to speak intelligently. Most people would say I probably don't speak intelligently anyway. Whenever there's this much change in a short time, absent an invasion or natural catastrophe or some stimulus, you got to question who's pulling the strings on the puppet, because there hasn't been like some big invasion or something that would spur this. This seems to be kind of out of nowhere, and that means somebody, a great power somewhere, be it the U.S., be it Turkey, be it someone else, is pushing some buttons.
Do you think, let's kind of ask the question here. Do you think that the Syria upheaval has anything to do with the Trump moving the Abraham Lincoln carrier group into the Middle East to attack Iran? Do you think there's a piece here somewhere?
I think the Abraham Lincoln carrier group is strictly a message for Iran. How that affects Syria, I don't know. If you're trying to intimidate Syria, you'd put them in the Mediterranean, and you have Incirlik Air Force Base in Turkey you can use too, assuming you got the Turks on board with it. So, I think the Abraham Lincoln, that carrier group is strictly to send a message to Iran and probably to our allies in the Persian Gulf, as to say, if push comes to shove, we have your back. We have the forces there to handle any situation. And a carrier group is a pretty powerful instrument, and people may or may not realize it. It's also a nuclear instrument. Carriers, all nuclear aircraft carriers carry nuclear weapons, and they have airplanes on board capable of delivering said nuclear weapons. That's why they are the ultimate way to project power anywhere in the world. And then you also have submarines as part of that, which can have land attack missiles, tomahawks, things like that, which may or may not be nuclear tipped as well. Not that I'm saying we're about to start a nuclear war, but the world knows this.
Right.
The Iranians certainly know this. So they have to be measured in what they say or do, because it's one thing to poke the bear. It's another thing to poke the bear when you're in the cage with it.
Yeah, that was my next question, because the Saudis, the Qataris, the Turks have all denied U.S. use of their bases to attack Iran, because they don't want the war to come back. Because Iran made the threat, the IRGC made the threat that whatever countries are involved in attacking Iran, we will attack them as well. I think that was part of the reason why they moved the U.S. the Abraham Lincoln carrier group into the Gulf. But when you look at how these three countries that are very strong U.S. allies have said, no, you're not going to use our bases to attack Iran, has it pushed the U.S. to kind of force their hand? Which is where my Syrian question comes from. Is if you create the upheaval in Syria, it throws the balance off in Iraq, and it puts the Iranians on notice from another border as well.
Yeah, it may put more pressure on their borders to the west and Kurdistan. so that it gives them something else they have to worry about. You know, if someone's got all their forces arrayed towards you, you start something over here, so they got to go, okay, crap, now we got to go cover that flank. And what that does is weaken what they can launch against you. You know, Gutter and all these guys saying, yeah, you can't use our bases. To be honest, I don't blame them, because they could say, okay, this is between you and Iran. We have to live here.
Right.
You know, even after you guys leave, Iran is just across the Gulf from us, and we don't want to deal with that crap. So if you want to hit them, knock yourselves out. Just don't do it from our territory. So that it's basically plausible deniability. We didn't know. We had nothing to do with it. You know, leave us alone. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, they're probably going, yeah, hit them again. It's just like when we took out their nuke facilities. I guarantee you, UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia were not disappointed that we bombed their nuclear sites. And they were not disappointed.
No, I'm sure they were.
Basically decapitated half of the Iranian government. Yeah, they were, I'm sure, publicly, oh, those bastard Israelis. And behind the scenes, it's like, great, now we don't have to worry about it.
Agreed. Let me put this map up. Jeff and I were talking about this before we went on air. This is a map that was created back in 2006 by a retired lieutenant colonel, Ralph Peters. And it was published in the Armed Forces Journal in an article called Blood Borders. And what it was him laying out a way to break up the Middle East so there would be more peace in the Middle East, using ethnic grounds and saying, okay, we'll create this for the Sunnis, we'll create this for the Shias, we'll separate out all the Islamic holy sites into a Vatican type of place. Jeff and I were talking about this before we went on air, and we kind of got to the understanding that the creation of this kind of a map would be very difficult because a lot of countries would not give up that much soil. But Jeff, can you share your comments, because you have a lot more historical background than I do?
Well, some of this has already been tried. It was tried during and after World War I. What you see is Greater Jordan, the Islamic Sacred State, which was kind of a Red Sea territory, and then Sunni Iraq was divided. It was the Hashemite kingdoms. There were three brothers, and they each were given a kingdom. And if anyone's seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia, the guy that Lawrence dealt with, Omar Sharif's character, that is the Islamic Sacred State. That is what he controlled. Transjordan, which became Jordan, was given to another brother. And the direct descendant of that brother is the king of Jordan right now. You had, King Hussein, and now you have King Abdullah. King Hussein's grandfather was the brother of the Omar Sharif character in Lawrence of Arabia. Then you had Sunni Iraq, which was given to yet the other brother, which was Babylon, the ancient area of Babylon, and he was only overthrown in the 1950s by the Baathists, and that's where Saddam sprang from. But they killed that king, and so this is kind of recreating that. Now, what happened to what's on here is the Islamic Sacred State, which was I can't remember the name of the kingdom, but it basically went down the whole coast of the Red Sea. Saud, the original Saud from Saudi Arabia, who was a nomadic Bedouin kind of guy, he took it over, and he fought them. They fought. He won, and that's where Saudi Arabia comes from. And he was not a great leader. He was not picked by anybody. Although we liked him more than the British did. The British didn't like him because they had British Petroleum had all the oil rights for what is now Saudi Arabia. When the Saudis took it over, when al-Saud took it over, the British wanted it. They said, "Hey, let's cut a deal." Well, what happened was there was a guy, a Brit, by the way, named St. John Philby, who had been a British Foreign Office guy who was a great explorer, was the first white guy to cross the empty quarter of Saudi Arabia on camels and all this. He was an Arabist, but he got into it with his own government and didn't like him anymore. They actually put him in prison thinking he was an enemy agent during World War One. He convinced al-Assad to give the oil concession to the Americans. And so that pissed off the Brits. Made us great. That's where Aramco comes from. It's, it was, it's the Arab American Oil Company. And here's a bit of historical trivia. St. John Philby's son was Kim Philby, who was one of the Cambridge spies, who was one of the most damaging spies in the history of MI6. So it all is connected. And St. John Philby,
you brought up history.
A Saudi citizen. They gave him he had a beautiful house in oh God, what was the city? It's on the coast between Mecca and Medina. It starts with a J. Can't remember the name of it.
Jeddah.
And he married a Saudi woman.
Jeddah.
But anyway, that's
Jeddah.
where he spent. Yeah, Jeddah. He spent the rest of his life there. But he was.
Now you brought up the Saudis. I'm going to ask another question. You brought up the British, so I'm going to ask another question. In 1953, the British overthrew the democratically elected government in Iran to secure oil rights.
It was a joint effort. Most of it, yeah.
Take us through that as well. Take us through that as well, because
Iran was the Shah. Actually, I think the Shah's dad had been in charge for years, and they were on our side, and we courted them, us and the Brits, during World War II. We kind of, Russia was making, with Soviet Union in those days, was looking at Iran with greedy eyes. They always wanted a warm water port. But anyway, we got the then Shah on our side. So we supported Iran. And the Brits had the oil concession basically for Iran. Well, they elected this guy Mossadegh, and legitimately elected, he became prime minister, but he was more socialist, and he wanted to nationalize all the British holdings in Iran, all their oil holdings.
Right.
Well, Britain was our ally. We were theirs. And Britain needed Iranian oil for the Royal Navy because all their ships ran on oil and they didn't have any of their own. The North Sea had not been discovered yet. Nobody knew that oil was there. So they depended on Iranian oil for their Navy. So they were not willing to give up the British petroleum interest in the Iranian oil industry. So they got with us, and it was the 50s, and we were, flexing our muscles after World War II. CIA, which had only existed for about 8 or 9 years at that point, and MI6 got together and basically overthrew Mossadegh, and then reinstated the Shah, the older Shah, the one who got overthrown in '79. And he was the son. He was considered he was new, probably not as strong a leader as his dad. Didn't have all the levers to pull yet, but we reinstated him. And then Iran became basically a U.S. and British vassal state. More U.S. after that, because I think Iran realized, the real power in that relationship ain't the British, it's the Americans. And so they kind of cozied up to us. And we needed them because we had, they were right on the Russian border, Soviet border, I should say. And we had listening posts all along the border, NSA, CIA, listening to Russian communications, intercepting the telemetry on their missile tests, all that kind of stuff. So it was a real key, a key strategic partnership.
Okay, so that's how we got from democracy and the Shah to the Islamic Revolution.
Right.
What we've seen in Iran over the last 20, 25 days, with all the violence, and what's happening in the country itself. Where do you think the U.S. is actually going to launch an attack?
I have no idea, because you've got to look at, if you're really, if you're going to do an attack, it's going to be something punitive. You hit IRGC headquarters here, you hit that kind of stuff. But I don't see us invading, because the American public, there's no way in hell they would invade. And Trump ran on the whole thing of no foreign wars. Hitting someone, bombing them, blowing them, building or two is fine. But we're not going to put, I don't ever see us putting boots on the ground in Iran. It's a big country.
Not no.
What, 60, 70 million people?
That's just, yeah.
It'd be a shit show.
There is
no buy-in for it. The public would go apeshit. Trump would lose his base in a heartbeat, because half of them voted for him because he says no more foreign wars.
Yeah, that's true. But my problem here is that when you look at the kind of violence that's been going on in Iran for the past 20 days, and Trump's statement that if they were to execute any of the protesters, then Iran is going to pay for it.
But they are executing.
You've got the Abraham. Well, they are. I mean, they're not going to stop. I have to draw the correlation between Syria and Iran. The U.S. government said to leave SDF alone, ceasefire. This was 3 days ago. They said no more fighting, no more invading, no more problems there. The Jilani forces still went ahead and attacked SDF-controlled areas. Iran, even though they have said publicly that they're not going to execute anyone, there have been 2 or 3 statements released from the Iranian government that, a couple of the protesters happened to die in the jails. And people don't just die. I mean, this is like an Epstein story. Well, he hung himself in jail.
Yeah, well, I've seen photos, and granted, they could be doctored up, but they show, young people dead in a morgue with a bullet hole in their forehead. But they also have the IV tubes and the patches, where it looks like they were patients in the hospital, and then somebody came in and shot them dead. You don't put a heart monitor patch on someone's chest if they've been shot through the forehead. They're dead.
No.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of, we'll pretend you're not doing it, and you pretend you're not doing it, and no one will ask. Because I think Trump kind of painted himself in a corner when he said that. It's like, okay, they're challenging you. What are you going to do? Now, he could launch airstrikes. He could take out facilities. He could turn the lights off. That'd be easy to do. He could take out IRGC headquarters, sure. But is he going to be sending in A-10s for close air support for the protesters? No, they don't have weapons. Now, what he might be able to do is, if he disrupts their ability to respond, if you take out key bridges, if you take out the power grid, they've already closed down the internet, to where the IRGC and these people don't have an ability to respond in a timely manner, then and it would give support to the protesters, where they may say, okay, we need to take the next step. We need to seize weapons from the Basingis or the Basijis and all those people in IRGC, and start a real revolution. But there's not going to be an army invading to save them, like Vietnam invaded Cambodia in '76.
No, that we know. I mean, Trump's promise when he took office was no more foreign wars, and he's going to hold to that promise as he can. But my question is more of, Trump did paint himself into a corner, I think. When he threatened Iran the way he did and said, we're going to bomb you and we're going to do this, he had to find an off-ramp someplace. And he found his off-ramp when Iran basically shut down the civilian unrest. I don't believe the stories that are coming out of Iran that was sponsored by foreign powers. I mean, MI6, Mossad, CIA have all been named as being, sponsors of that foreign unrest. I don't see the Shah's son having enough support either. And Trump said it himself, that I don't see the Shah's son having enough support to take over the government if we were to remove the mullahs from power. The dangerous piece is that if you remove the mullahs, it does not end the IRGC, and they could end up taking power, and you would have a military junta in power. That would be more dangerous for the region than anything else.
Because the IRGC, people don't realize, is they own most of the damn country. They would go into companies and say, we want to buy a minority stake in your company. And buy a minority stake means we're not going to give you much money, but we're going to take all the control. I had talked to an Iranian kid whose father owned the business. I'm not going to say anything more than that. IRGC came in and said, yeah, it's ours now. And I had talked to another Iranian who, he was a member, he was a Christian. And he was a Christian. His father was a senior Christian leader in a denomination in Iran. And they basically went to his boss, who was the head of the church, and said, sign over all the properties to us and give us the keys. And the guy goes, I can't do that. So they shot him in the head. And then they went to my friend's dad and said, okay, now you're in charge because we just killed your boss. Sign over all the property to us and hand us the keys. And he went, yeah, here you go. Where do I sign? And then they bailed out of the country like 48 hours later. All those properties belong to the IRGC. That's how they fund. They control the economy. They own or control all the major businesses. That's why their economy is such a shit show, because the people running it are not business people. Iranians have a huge storied history as businessmen. They've always had strong economies. They've always had good, because they're good traders and brokers. But that's not who's running their economy now. It's these mullahs and military or quasi-military guys. It's basically thugs. So it's like a mafia. They are not going to.
It's kind of like what's going on.
Yeah, they are not.
It's kind of like what goes on.
Yeah. They are not going to give up that power. If you get rid of the mullahs, the guys running the steel mills and the stores and the mall, they're not going to give up anything. And you got to realize why this crisis started this time was a bank failure. There was a bank, and one of the things it had done, it had funded this one shopping mall in Tehran, largest shopping mall in the world. I mean, millions of square feet. Well, the loan went bad. And the guy who was building it was friends of the regime, so he got a good deal from this bank. I can't remember the name of the bank, started with an A, because the bank was basically money laundering, and the government would just give them more money to keep things going. Well, the bank collapsed. Well, when the bank collapsed, everybody who was supporters of the regime, they used to put their money in it because they thought, well, it's a regime bank; they'll never let it fail. And it basically collapsed. And then that's when the economy just imploded. It went to 1.3 million rial to the dollar. And it was the merchants who started rising up. It wasn't students. It wasn't anything like that. It was the guys in the bazaar who sold you your cell phone. These are the guys that went nuts because they're like, okay, I've got a dump truck full of money, but I can't buy a cell phone with it to turn around and sell to somebody else. That's what caused it. But it was all cronyism, corruption, the government, pumping up this bank that was, it was like a big Ponzi scheme. And we saw it here during the savings and loan debacle and all that. But it happened there on a much grander scale. But they're just printing money to try and get out of the problem. Well, it just makes inflation work.
Yeah, I mean, I remember before the unrest started, the Iranian government, quote unquote, the regime said they were going to give 400,000 rial to every single Iranian just to try and stabilize what was happening.
$7. Yeah. Sounds like a lot. It reminds me when I was in Turkey back in the 90s once, and I came back and I gave my son a 1,000,000 lira note, Turkish lira. I said, son, here's your inheritance. I've given you, you're now a millionaire. He goes, really? What's this worth? I go, about $1.70. But it's Weimar Republic stuff. 3 billion mark notes floating around. But that's what that's the situation they're in now. They're like Zimbabwe 15 years ago.
Yeah. But I'm going to connect this because if we look at one of the the vassal states of Iran, the Houthis in Yemen. Just recently, we saw the Saudis and the UAE go to war with each other and say, you know, we're not gonna allow the UAE to operate inside of Yemen anymore because they no longer supported the quote unquote leader that had been selected. What's your take? Because you've got, and I'm going to put this way, you've got Turkey, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia that have formed a Middle East NATO. And you've got the UAE who's gone Israel, India, and the UAE as the competing organization against this. But do you see this as having any kind of success anywhere?
You know what this reminds me of, and believe me, I'm not a historian in this subject because it's kind of esoteric, is Europe in the late 1800s or up to World War II, you know, kind of before the formation of Germany. Most people don't realize that Germany, as we know it, didn't exist until, you know, the 19th century. There were all these little kingdoms and principalities that Bismarck, through his strength of will, basically crammed together, and that became Germany. It was built around Prussia; they were the most powerful ones. But it was all these little, you know, Mecklenburg and Bavaria and all this. They crammed them all together, and that became Germany. But until then, you know, you would have neighbors who were aligned with this group, and your guy across the river was aligned with that group. And that kind of what it reminds me of is nobody in the Middle East wants to cede power or authority to anybody else. Saudi Arabia goes, we have the holy sites. We're geographically the biggest country. But, and then UAE is going, well, that's nice, but, you know, we got a higher per capita income than you do, and we've got a more diverse economy than you do, which they do. And so there's all that. He's like, well, why are we listening to you? Why do you who made you the boss? You're not the boss of me. And, and that's kind of what we're getting into. And these are all
but it's
and mirrors, and there's egos involved.
Yeah. But Jeff, I'm gonna put this up. Do you think there's any truth to the story that they're trying to get Mohammed bin Zayed to step down and cede control of the United Arab Emirates to Sheikh Mohammed?
You mean what? You Sheikh Mohammed from Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Mohammed, or Sheikh Mohammed from
Dubai?
From UAE. Well, that may be internal family politics and stuff, but I don't know. I'm not well versed in that, but we've seen it play out before in Saudi Arabia, where there's internal family stuff. You know, Mohammed bin Salman, you know, the guy in charge now. You know, it wasn't too long ago where his family was on the outs, but then there was a power play, and then his dad gets bumped up above somebody else, and it's really very Machiavellian in a lot of ways. A lot of internal palace intrigue, stuff that we think about in the Middle Ages in Europe. It's going on today in the Middle East because the Saudi royal family is huge, and it's, you know, who's the leader today, but he can change who his successor is in a heartbeat, and that has happened.
Yeah.
And you know,
many
Salman is a younger guy, and he's more pro-Western, and he got picked over several others, including his older brother. So there is, and none of these guys are elected. Guarantee you, none of them are elected. This is all internal family politics. Think about Hatfields and McCoys, you know, in West Virginia or something. I mean, there is no real logic to it. There are no rules. It's whoever wins, wins.
Yeah, but I mean, the stories we're hearing, I mean, we've been hearing this for about, I'd say maybe 2.5 weeks. The U.S. and Qatar and Turkey and Oman, and there's another Arab state that's involved. They're putting pressure on Mohammed bin Zayed that he should cede power to Sheikh Mohammed, because they believe Sheikh Mohammed would be more acceptable to the Saudi royal family, because Saudi Arabia is the U.S.'s largest partner in the Middle East. um, outside of Israel, and it's, I don't want to call it palace intrigue, but it
It
does look a
is.
lot like palace intrigue
You
because
can
King
call it
Salman
Palestine.
is running the
That's
show.
exactly what it is. But you also got to look at, people don't realize that the United Arab Emirates, we think of it as one country. It's really not. I think, well, there's 7
Nope.
Emirates. You've got Dubai.
7 Emirates. Yep.
You've got Abu Dhabi. You've got Sharjah. And they all have different powers.
Leaders. Yep.
Dubai is the financial hub of the country, but the political hub is Abu Dhabi. But right next to Dubai, you also have Sharjah, which is
and Sharjah.
I've been to Sharjah.
Cultural hub.
It's a very nice place, but it's more conservative. It is more family oriented. I mean, I stayed in Sharjah. I had to drive to Dubai to get a beer, but you can get a beer in Dubai.
No, I spent 8 years in the UAE. I spent 8 years working in the UAE. And I remember Sharjah was
7 different countries kind of rammed together.
Yep.
Almost like a European Union on the Persian Gulf.
Yeah. But it's interesting because Sharjah is run by Sheikh Mohammed's daughter. She is the head of Sharjah. You've got Sheikh Mohammed that runs Dubai. You've got Mohammed bin Zayed who runs the UAE as a whole, and he's head of Abu Dhabi as well.
Abu Dhabi.
It's almost like it's still palace intrigue because the family is saying, well, I think I should be in control. And the other one's going, well, wait a minute, I should be in control. The problem I see is that the UAE, because of their involvement in Somalia, in moving weapons into Somalia, they have created a lot of problems amongst the Arab states because the Arab states didn't like the fact that they were moving weapons in covertly into Somalia. And as a result, I think they're looking to make a change to someone that they can control more, because what they're seeing is the Arab states trying to extort's the wrong word, exhibit more power into what they can do.
And people also got to realize that, okay, well, all these families are related by marriage at some point. You have this prince marries that princess, blah blah blah. Just like Europe is. Everybody's, when not Queen Elizabeth, but when Queen Victoria died, almost every royal family, every royal house in Europe showed up to her funeral because she was everybody's freaking grandmother. In World War I, King of England, the Kaiser, and the Tsar of Russia were all first cousins. They all grew up together. They all, and this is much the same way. But you also have varying degrees in those societies, you're well aware because you live there, of either pro-West, more secular, and then you have some real diehard Islamist fanatics. When I was in Afghanistan, we did I must use the word rendition because that's a nasty word. We apprehended. So this guy, he was the last al-Qaeda guy in the province that we could find. He was from UAE. He was a finance guy. He was, he called himself Kareem, but I don't know what his real name was. And when we busted him, he said, I'm just a laborer, but his hands were as smooth as a baby's ass. This guy had never done a hard day's work in his life. And when he was searched, he screamed out in Arabic, which was a language he said he did not know, which is pretty impressive. Apparently, when someone shoves their finger up your butt in a rubber glove, you instantly learn to speak Arabic, as he did. Anyway, but he was from UAE, but he was a fanatic. He was al-Qaeda, and he was in Afghanistan. This was, 2002. This was right after 9/11. So there's all kinds of people there. There is no unitary voice. There is no unitary political thought or movement. So it's like any other country. There's going to be ebbs and flows and backbiting and politicking and, smoke-filled rooms, just like anywhere else in the world.
Well, you bring up the Arabs in Afghanistan. If you remember, I know you spent some time in Pakistan. If you remember how the Waziristan community was set up, you had a lot of Arabs that had moved into Waziristan during the 1980s and 90s, married Pakistani girls, and were paying a protection fee to the community leader in that place, so that nobody would tell them that this was an Arab living in the region and he was Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Those places still exist
We had the
today.
same thing in Afghanistan. In fact, the guy who dined him out to us was his brother-in-law. Brother-in-law didn't like him. But we had
Isn't fact.
Well, we had a lot of Pakistanis up there too. This was up in Balkh province, up in the north. And when when the war started, they kind of got left behind because they had no way to get out, and they all got. And that's when Dostum came in and he threw them all in prison in Sheboygan. And we were up there, and the FBI actually came out was to fingerprint and take pictures and get DNA samples from all these guys. So if they ever showed up on our doorstep again, we could positively identify them. And every single one of them said, I am just a poor Pakistani truck driver. I was the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm not a bad guy. Okay, well, if we let you loose, what are you going to do? Kill Americans. Okay, well, good to know. They would literally say that. They weren't surprised.
There's more time in that cell there.
Yeah, so you know these kind of folks, but it's a weird part of the world from an American perspective. People in the United States don't have the experience with that kind of mentality to make sense of it. Now, if you've been over there and you've worked over there, you lived over there, yeah, it makes sense to you. But for people in the United States, who've only been exposed to Western culture, it makes no sense.
No way will it make. I mean, when I first moved to Pakistan, it made no sense to me. I was like, how does this work? I mean, everybody's very two-faced. Everyone is very two-faced. They say one thing to you and they're planning something else behind it.
Oh,
and when you deal with the jihadis, the Islamists, they're very friendly in the very beginning. When you first meet them, they're very friendly in the beginning. But once they figure out that you're not on their side, wow, do their intentions change very quickly.
they cut yourself.
Yeah, but I want to bring this up because I don't know why the U.S. made this decision. There's a lot of rumor floating around on why they dumped the SDF. One side is saying that the SDF was told that if you are willing to invade Iraq and fight the Shias, then the U.S. will continue to back you. And the SDF said, we're not mercenaries. We're not going to go and fight in another country just because you said so. And that's kind of where the whole swing with Tom Barak came in. It's a really lengthy post that Barak put up where he kind of explained exactly why he was holding the position he did. And he told the SDF leadership that, look, we want you to integrate into the Syrian army. We want you to figure out a structure where you get some role in the government. You will hand over all the oil fields you have control of. You will hand over all the ISIS prisons that you have control of to Jolani, which makes no sense to me. And then Barak turned around and said, well, Jolani is a better counterterrorism partner for us to fight ISIS with than SDF was. And SDF's entire creation and support was to fight ISIS. And the U.S. turned and said, well, no. We trust Jolani more than we trust you. And it made me go, wait a minute. Isn't that what Kissinger said? That it's dangerous to be an enemy of the U.S. and fatal to be a friend. Is that not what Kissinger's quote was?
What was it? Dangerous to be an enemy and what?
Fatal to be a friend.
Yeah, well, it could be. Yeah, ask Dien in Vietnam. Yeah, we looked the other way when General Min basically did a coup and had him killed.
Yeah. What do you see as the reason? Because we've talked about this on so many episodes where Jolani is ISIS. He will always be ISIS. He will never give up the ideology that he held. Where did the U.S. get the idea that handing over the prisons that had all the ISIS prisoners in them to Jolani was a good idea?
I have no clue where that came in. That's like turning over the federal penitentiary in Chicago to Al Capone.
Yeah.
you know, it makes no sense to me, other than it was, if we take it off our plate, we can tell people we solved the problem and then move on to bigger and better things. It's like, let's declare victory and go home, whether you have victory or not.
Kind of like the accomplished banner. Kind of like Bush's mission accomplished banner.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of like Bush's mission.
Okay, woohoo! And we do that a lot because we don't have the patience or we don't have the stomach. Yeah, it's the old, you break it, you bought it. Well, we're good at breaking things. We're not good at the buying part. We saw with Afghanistan, we were in there for 20 freaking years. We should have gone in initially, blown the crap out of them, killed all the people we wanted to kill, and then leave. We didn't learn from, I don't know, Alexander the Great, British, Russians, Indians.
The numerous
Tamerlan, Genghis Khan, everybody else. I mean, it's like it's a tar baby, and it always has been, and it probably always will be. But we didn't learn from that. We always think, well, it's like the people who want to try socialism. We'll do it right this time. People who invade Afghanistan think, okay, I've studied history. I know what everybody else did wrong. We'll do it right. No, you won't. No, you won't.
No, you won't get it right. You won't get it right. I mean, no one's gotten it right so far. How are you going to get it right?
No. So,
and here's where the problem comes in. I mean, we gave up control, and this is a video that was 10 hours ago in Raqqa. It just, again, I am shocked when I see stuff like this. This is the ISIS flag being raised. Here's where my problem comes in, Jeff. We knew this was coming. I mean, anyone who had half a brain knew this was going to happen. And when you handed over all the ISIS prisons, I think on the first day, 1,500 ISIS fighters were released. And we've got the videos of Jolani's soldiers opening the gates saying, go on, go on, go on. And you've got 3 cities have already fallen. 4 cities are in the process of being taken. Raqqa was the capital of the caliphate when ISIS was in full control.
Yeah.
And you've lost Raqqa again. Iraq is so scared right now that they have moved their military to the border to fend off any kind of invasion from ISIS. How serious do you think this is going to become? Because for me, it's been 2 days since I've slept, because ever since this whole SDF and Syrian army issue started, we've been monitoring intelligence coming out of there. It's been coming so fast that our head is spinning on what's happening. Where does Trump stand on this? Where does Barack stand on this? And who's responsible for the screw up?
I don't know where Trump stands, but I haven't heard anything coming out of the administration on this issue at all. Really, Trump's been focusing on Greenland and WEF and all this other crap. I don't know. And Sunni Iraq, which is most of Iraq now, or the especially Eastern Iraq or Western Iraq is Sunni. Yeah, they're worried because they probably look at, ISIS comes in, they're going to try and recruit all their people. Shias generally don't go to ISIS because Shias are Shia and ISIS is Sunni. But if you're a Sunni country, you're looking, they're looking to recruit my citizens into their army, and that's not a good thing. Last thing you want is an insurgency where you can't tell the good guys from the bad guys. But I don't know that they have the capability to do much. Jelani's forces in Syria, I don't know that they've got the capability either. I mean, they may have some bodies, but they don't have a logistics stream. They don't have an air force. They have very few tanks. They're more of a great big gang than they are an army. Yeah, they overthrew, Assad. Assad was falling apart.
Israel took care of a lot of that. I mean, when Giuliani was in the process of collapsing the Assad regime, I mean, Israel went through and bombed every military base that Syria had. So there'd be no air force, there'd be no military, there'd be nothing that would stand up to them. But the problem I see right now is that when you look at it from a terrorist point of view, when you have 1,500 fighters immediately join an already established terrorist army, because Giuliani's military is all jihadis, and when you put in 1,500 more terrorists, and then you start opening up the doors to more camps and saying, okay, you join, that explodes very quickly. And the bombshell that could happen because of Iraq, because of Syria, puts the entire region in turmoil. And my problem here is,
they're going to be, terrorists are going to terrorize, and it can be in Lebanon, it could be in Syria. They may have a little hard time going into Israel because they've got the border pretty tight, clamped down. But they could go into Turkey. They can certainly go into Iraq. They can go into Jordan. Yeah, they can destabilize the region relatively quickly. But you send a few suicide bombers out there. People make car bombs and go into a market somewhere and set it off. Yeah, you've got regional instability, and and once you start doing stuff like that, the economy is going to start grinding to a halt. People aren't going to be investing money. People aren't going to be going to work. And it's going to be a shit show. And if Iraq, I don't blame them for moving troops to the border, saying, keep your garbage in your country. We don't want you here. But Turkey's, I know Turkey is kind of encouraging this. It could blow up in their face, too. Of course, I'm going to tell you,
it's not kind of.
If there's a car bomb, they're going to lay on Kurds no matter what.
Well, the amount of intelligence we're getting on Turkey is that Turkey is funding and arming Giuliani's army to go into Iraq. That's the goal. That they go in and they wipe out the Kurds. That's the intention, and that can backfire. Turkey has for a long time been a through point for ISIS fighters, for Al Qaeda fighters. They would stop over in Turkey from Afghanistan. Passport would get changed, and they'd move into Europe from there, or they'd apply for asylum from Turkey. What we're seeing right now is, and Erdogan gave two speeches very recently. They're very interesting. Day before yesterday, he gave a speech supporting the Iranians, that we believe our Irani brothers will be able to stand up to the revolution that's being caused in their country. Today, he turned around and said, I fully believe in that all we have is the Brotherhood of Islam. And Erdogan is the de facto president of the Muslim Brotherhood. We all know that. Turkey and Qatar being on Trump's board of peace really creates a question for me. That who are you inviting to be part of the peace process?
Well, Turkey is, I can't speak for Erdogan. I don't know what goes on in that guy's head. But they forever have been, their big thing, their one-trick pony is the Kurds. They hate the Kurds. Yep. The Kurds want to carve out part of Turkey to be part of Greater Kurdistan. They don't want that. I get it. For a longest time, it was the Russians, because the Russians wanted to cut, not the Soviets, the Russians wanted to take over the Dardanelles so that, because they had the Black Sea Fleet, but it depended on going through Turkish-controlled waterways, and they didn't like that. They wanted to be a great power with their own fleet, and that way they could sortie into the Mediterranean. That was in the 1800s. Well, then that's why Turkey became part of NATO, is because they had the Dardanelles. And then when the Soviets were there, we wanted them on our side so we could keep the Russians, the Soviet Black Sea Fleet, muddled up in the Black Sea if we had to. Well, Turkey's, you got to remember, they were for most people who, listening to this, Turkey was the capital of the Ottoman Empire. And it was a huge empire. Yep. And I think just like Putin wants to reestablish the Soviet Union in his mind and recreate it, I think the Turks, to a large extent, would love to re-establish the Ottoman Empire with Turkey and with a capital in Istanbul as the head of the Ottoman Empire. But the Kurds have been a pain in their ass for decades, for generations, because the Kurds want to have their own country. And so they, the PKK, there was this long-running revolution or insurgency, whatever you want to call it. And it only recently kind of got tamped down. But anytime the Kurds kind of bubble back up, Turkey will do whatever they can to stomp on them. And if that means supporting ISIS and Jelani, they'll support ISIS and Jelani. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that's, I think, is what we're seeing there.
Yep. And to add a little bit more to what you're saying, if you look at, this is one day. This is literally one day.
Wow. Okay.
Look at how much the SDF lost because America said we're not going to support you anymore. I mean, you lost Raqqa, you lost al-Halwa camp, which is an ISIS, which was where ISIS women and children were being held. You lost so many cities that now you literally have taken over Syria. You're on the borders with everybody now. And I don't know where you're going to get support at this point to do anything other than to conquer, because you now have control of all of the ISIS prisons. You have control of all of the ISIS camps. You have control of all of the jihadi armies, and you're going to integrate all of them in. You're going to wipe out the Kurds. That's Turkey's goal, is to wipe out the Kurds. But the backlash of this is Iraq is going to be invaded. Turkey's going to get hit whether they like it or not. And
there's going to be backlash.
This is where the double game. Oh my God. Yeah, there's going to be backlash. I mean, you can't fund somebody and think they're going to play on your side. I mean, the U.S. made that mistake with the U.S. with Afghanistan
multiple times. Believe me.
That's exactly where I was headed. That we made that mistake in Afghanistan. We're now making the same mistake in Syria. How many times are we going to do this? How many times are we going to see this stupidity happen? It's not just the U.S. Turkey's done it. The Saudis have done it. The UAE has done it. The British have done it. How many times are we going to see this mistake happen and then go, oh shit, how do we fix it now?
All of them. It's going to happen. It happens every time. And the Turks are going to find it with the Kurds. Yeah, the Kurds, have been kind of quiet lately in Turkey. But people don't generally stand idly by while you try to murder them. And even the Nazis saw that with the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. People generally just don't say, okay, you can shoot me in the head. I'll just sit here. There's going to be pushback. And the Kurds have been fighting for generations. It's in their blood.
Yep. It's like the Afghanis. I mean, they've been fighting ever since Afghanistan was created, they've been fighting.
Yeah, who the hell would think the Afghanis were not going to fight? They've always fought. It's like saying, my dog, okay, I know about dogs, but this one will never bark. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. I'm going to draw the connection here. I mean, since Jelani's come into power, he's slaughtered Druze, he's slaughtered Alwatis, he's slaughtered Christians.
Yeah.
Now with the SDF and the Kurds losing support, we saw a video where the Christians in Syria have now aligned themselves with the SDF, taken up weapons, and said, we will fight Jelani's army. We've got another insurgency coming up well, not even an insurgency. If ISIS takes on the character it had before, it's going to slaughter everybody.
Yeah.
How do we lose another country to a terrorist regime?
Well, okay, they'll come in, they'll start doing all that, but the world's not a vacuum. People will respond. And maybe it'll be the Israelis, because any country that does that, or any group that does that, they always overstep. They always go one step too far, and then they piss off the wrong people, and they come back and just smoke them. And I think what they're going to do, they may turn on the Israelis, and the Israelis will just blow the crap out of them, because they're going to pick on.
Well, the Kurds have already called out. The Kurds have already asked the Israelis for military support. This was about 4 out.
Jelani. I think Jelani he may push the Kurds out of Syria. He may think he's got it made, and then he'll say, "Well, great, let me push south." And then that's going to blow up in his face.
That's not gonna happen.
Israel's not going to give up. You may say, we want the Golan Heights back. Yeah, no, that ain't happening.
No, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
It's just like if he decides to push into Turkey, even though Turkey may be his ally this week, he tries to push into Turkey and say, well, we want this territory. Yeah, Turkey's not going to give up an inch of ground.
Yeah, that's just not going to happen.
He's kind of sandwiched between two great powers. So he's got to push west through Lebanon or east through Iraq. He can't push south into Israel. He can't push north into Turkey. And if he pushes into Jordan, he may get his ass kicked there as well, because there's a lot of red lines along there. There's that U.S. buffer zone in there. We have troops there. Yeah, that could blow up in his face really fast. So he can either go into Lebanon or he can go into Iraq.
Yep, and that's two places he can really support. I mean, well, even in Lebanon, you've got Hezbollah to deal with, and Hezbollah's not going to tolerate you coming into there.
They're all Shias, and they're not going to put up with it. But that's another group of folks that they've been fighting for generations. The Druze, the Shias, the Sunni. Yeah, it's a mess.
These are all ethnic groups that have spent generations fighting, and that fighting, like you said, is in their blood. Conquering them is not going to be very easy. And the problem I see right now is that with Jolani getting the amount of money he's getting, and I'm going to tie this back to 9/11 2.0, when you look at the amount of money Jolani's getting from, he just before they took on the SDF, they got $850 million from the EU. You've got U.S. support militarily. You've got Israeli support to a certain extent. You've got Turkish support to a certain extent. But when you look at the amount of money that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda are getting in Afghanistan, and you look at the amount of money that Jolani has for ISIS now, 9/11 2.0 is going to see a flood of money coming into the U.S. because IRGC is already connected with Antifa and TDA. They're going to pump money in. And part of what we're seeing in Minnesota, I see is, for lack of better example, it's the CIA's regime change playbook being played out on U.S. soil.
That could be color revolution.
Because if you look at, well, if you look at it from the point of view of ever since Trump has come to power, I mean, it's been different groups rising up against him. I mean, first it was California, then it was Oregon, then we had the shooting in Texas at the ICE facility. Now we've got Minnesota that's literally openly challenging ICE and saying, we're not going to tolerate you. They're doxing the families. They're doxing the children. At what point does Trump say, that's it, I'm going to enact the Insurrection Act?
That could happen any week now. But I think what's going to be interesting is when they're going after now they're going after the corruption in Minnesota is so rampant that there's going to be ties to so many people, either through corruption, money in their pocket, or incompetence, where it was happening and they let it happen, or willful neglect. I think these people are going to get distracted by their own criminal charges, so that they're going to be on the defensive. And I really think a lot of these anti-ICE protests, the reason they've peaked or they've gotten so large is not because there's so much against ICE, because most of these agitators are from outside of the state, is they're trying to run interference for the fraud. They want to distract from the billions and billions in fraud, because again, follow the money. It's not all going to Somalia. If it did, Somalia would be like the freaking Riviera. Some of it's going there, a lot of it's going there, but a lot of it's being kicked back to the Democratic Party, to all these NGOs, just like we saw with USAID. You send 100 million overseas and 50 million comes back. And it's going to be the same thing. They're trying to protect their gravy train.
Yeah, but I mean, we've seen the TSA reports. We've seen the videos of Somalians, I mean, this is TSA officers saying that we had people walking through Minneapolis airport with suitcases with $1 million in cash
Yeah.
and flying to Somalia and handing it over. And then when we traced it back, that money, once it got to Somalia, went straight to al-Shabaab. And
Yeah.
you saw where the power is coming up in Somalia. The problem I see, and I've gotten a bunch of spreadsheets from Texas, from California, from Michigan. I think there's 4 or 5, Georgia, where they've outlined all the fraud that's happened in their states. When you look at it from the point of view of the level of fraud and the level of corruption that's going on in the United States right now, it's great cover what's going on in Minnesota, but I do think that this is a great cover as well for the terrorists to be able to make a move so they can attack the U.S. Because we've always said, trigger events, trigger events, trigger events. This is a beautiful trigger event. You've got insurrection starting. You've got fighting starting everywhere. The U.S. is mobilizing 1,500 troops to move into Minnesota and deal with these protesters, because now they've become armed. They've created the vacuum. In our point of view, they've created the vacuum that now allows the terrorists to move their sleeper cells and carry out the attacks. And we haven't heard anything in the past week and a half, 10 days from any kind of a terrorist type of action inside the United States, which means that we're probably inside that window of quiet time where we've always said, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of absolute silence, and then the attacks would start. From our read, we see this is all a setup to create the opportunity for the terrorist attacks to start moving. Because one car bomb, and I'll take your analogy, one car bomb in Minneapolis in the middle of the protesters, and you've got mayhem. That's a mass casualty event right there.
Well, and if you're the terrorist, it's perfect, because you're not going, you get all what you want to accomplish. But if a bomb goes off in Minneapolis tomorrow, they're not going to blame terrorism. They're not going to, and you're not going to blame ICE. ICE isn't blowing people up. It's the Antifa. It's all the leftists. And so everybody will be, blaming the leftists, whether it's them or not, but you still get the two sides basically going at it now, saying, okay, you're using bombs, you're doing this, you're shooting people. And it's going to get out of hand. It's like everybody's standing around knee deep in gasoline, and someone not involved flicks a match in, it's going to go up. But the guy flicking the match isn't the one who's going to get burned. But then while they're fighting, then you do your terrorist attacks, then you do all this. And the two sides that should be coalescing together to fight the terrorists are still going to be fighting each other. It's going to make the recovery and the response even more complicated.
Yep. That's what we were seeing. As I was talking to Chris about this earlier, I said, listen, I see this as being a 3-week window right now. We're 3 weeks away from attacks starting, because the ramp up has started. The spread of riots, the spread of protests around the U.S. is moving. You need cover to cover up what you've done over the past 10 years, 12 years in the United States in terms of corruption. That creates the opportunity for an attack of some kind. And one IED, and we'll do it really simple. Put one IED inside of an area where there's protests going on, and you detonate that IED, and all of a sudden law enforcement moves and the city is not defended and the terrorists can attack. We are inside that 3-week window. I think that it's now the calm before the storm, and they're going to let these insurgents carry out whatever they want, do whatever they want, and they're going to pick their move as to when they can carry out the attack. And my question becomes, how is it that the Democratic government, if they're not tied in with the terrorists, are not seeing what kind of opportunities they're creating for a mass casualty event?
They're blind, they're drunk on power, and that's all they care about protecting. But okay, let's look at it. Okay, we've talked about the 9/11 2.0 scenarios. All right, so terrorists do an attack, they hit a concert, they hit a school, they do something. and they fall back on a hospital and they've taken control of the hospital. And if we have to send in, army troops basically to help to take it back because there are no other forces that can do it, I can guarantee you there will be a ton of people on the left that will say, oh my God, the army's invading. We need to be, we should be showing solidarity with the guys in the hospital who are beheading people on TV because they're against Trump. Because the Democrats are, not all, but the radicals, I should say, the radicals on the left are so, it's like a religious fervor with them. There is no logic involved. They, if it's like they say, if Trump cured cancer, they'd be pro-cancer tomorrow. And
that's true.
And Trump walks on water. The headline is Trump can't swim. But we could have a terrorist attack in this country, and if Trump came out against the terrorist attack, which you would expect him as the president of the United States to do, there are people on the left who would say, by God, we're pro-terrorist now. Trump is against them, we're for him. Well, we've already seen it with Antifa. Antifa is a terrorist group. And the Democrats are in bed with them.
Yep. And that's why I asked the question the way I did, that if the Democrats are not in bed with the terrorists, because Antifa is one of their organizations, the radical left is one of their organizations, Trans-Tifa is one of their organizations, you have created the opportunity for the useful idiots to be used as useful idiots. And that sets up 9/11 2.0 very easily, because one IED. I mean, let's take New Orleans, for example. New Orleans, when Shahab drove his car into that group of people, had an IED blown up at that point, the casualty count would have been 25, 50, 100 people. If that was followed up with an attack on a school, an attack on a police station, on an attack and falling back to the hospital, it's game over. And the hate for Donald Trump is exactly what you said, that if the terrorists were to attack tomorrow, the left would automatically step onto the terrorist bandwagon and say, oh, wait, well, no. We need to stand with the terrorists because they're attacking Donald Trump. They have created, and I'm saying it this way, but they've created the most perfect scenario to carry out their attacks.
Yeah. The other thing I could see them saying is, well, this is all a put on. This Trump, the Trump and the Republicans set up these attacks to make us look bad. They're totally deluded. It's like, someone's, the dog's at their throat biting, and they go, it's not the dog's fault, it's your fault. Well, the dog's got his teeth on your throat. Yeah, but if it wasn't for you, I don't think the dog would be here. Well, but he is here. They will not.
This is,
and they're just delusional.
My problem is that you are creating the opportunity for the mass casualty event.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that you're doing it, or you're doing it on purpose. You're creating that opportunity that Al-Qaeda, and again, when you talk about sanctuary cities and blue states, you have got those terrorists embedded in those cities already because they're sanctuary cities. And for them to carry off an attack is very easy. And a lot of people have been asking in the signal channels, a lot of people have been asking whether this attack could be carried out right now. And you're seeing it. The buildup is there. The buildup is there. The buildup is there. And every day it gets closer and closer to going boom. And when it goes boom, it's going to be mayhem, because you've got the anti-Trump side that's going to say, well, you caused this. And you've got the terrorists that are going to say, sit back, wait for it, let them explode on themselves, let them start fighting with themselves. And then we carry out another attack. Then we carry out another attack. Then we carry out another attack. They have created the exact scenario, opportunity, situation that the terrorists can take advantage of. And the reason we're seeing silence over the past week, 10 days, is I think the terrorists are going, wait a minute, let them keep doing what they're doing because they're doing what we want them to do. Don't get involved.
If you have two enemies and you can set them on each other, let them go. Let them tear each other up.
Let them go.
Once they turn each other up, then you kick the shit out of the survivor. You know, you don't want to be
Yep.
the first guy fighting. You want to be the
Absolutely.
last guy fighting. And
Yeah. Because
sadly, we've got the left that is so blinded by their own Trump derangement syndrome, they can't see anything else but that. And it's
yep.
like, oh my God, how stupid are you people? But well, they're it again. It's not politics with them. It's a religion, and you can't argue
It
religion.
is. No. Well, it's not. It's radicalization from my point of view. I mean, you have been
It's a
so
cult.
radicalized to hate Trump that you don't see anything else. I mean, how we're Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, all made speeches against illegal aliens and said they need to be removed from the United States. All of them
Right.
said it.
Right.
You forget what your previous leaders said, and all of a sudden Trump is wrong in saying we want to arrest illegals and throw
He
them out
says
of
the
the country.
exact same thing. What you see it when you have these
Yep.
people on the street. You say, you know, Trump said X, and oh yeah, he's such an ass. It's like, well, actually, Biden said that, or you know, Biden said this. Well, that sounds very reasonable. Actually, Biden didn't say that. Trump did, and then they don't know what to do. But you know, they are. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when Trump is no longer president, because it's like, where is your anger and animosity going to go? You know, how
Well,
can
they're
you
still going to hate him. I mean,
but how can you have Trump derangement syndrome and complain about the government when he's no longer the president of the United States?
well,
And
you
he
blame
can't
the
come back.
successor.
He can't-
You were one of his. You were one of his. I mean, because JD Vance is being groomed to be the next presidential
Yeah.
candidate. You got to expect that if JD Vance takes over, that whatever JD Vance does, they're going to blame on Trump.
Oh yeah, but but again, yeah, it's like it's an obsession. You know, it's like
Yeah.
they're stalkers. We have a country
Yeah.
with, you know, tens of millions of irrational stalkers.
Yeah.
You know, they
Yeah.
need to, you know,
I-
like they're going to boil a bunny somewhere. It's like fatal attraction
Well,
on a nationwide scale. I mean, I was
I
never
think
a Joe Biden fan, but I don't wish the guy ill. You know, I don't what, you know, when
No.
they diagnosed him with cancer, I wasn't like, oh goody, he's got cancer. No, I don't want him as my president. I think he's literally got dementia. I've saw it because my dad had dementia. I've seen it up close, know what it looks like. And I never thought he was a good president. I never thought he was a smart man. You know, I've been around long enough to remember all the times he ran for president, and he got a couple of those campaigns went down the tubes because he got caught lying and plagiarizing. You know, and it was embarrassing. Back then it was embarrassing and people had to quit. But I don't wish him ill. I'm not going to dance on his grave when he dies or anything like that. He's just, at this point, he's a harmless little man. Let him be. But they can't do that. Trump to them is the devil incarnate.
Yep.
You know, he's anti-immigrant. Okay, he only married two. You know, his first wife and his current wife were immigrants, so I don't think he's anti-Semitic. Okay, his daughter, son-in-law, and grandkids are Jewish, so I don't think he's really anti-Jew.
So how is he?
I'm just gonna say, you know, but yeah, they pull all this stuff out of their ass.
Well, we've never seen the U.S. this divided. I mean, I grew up there, and I grew up during the Trump era. I grew up during the Clinton era. I grew up during the Bush Quayle era. There was never this much division at that point. I mean, you had a president, you either supported him or you didn't support him, but nobody hated him. And now you've gotten to the point where you have to hate who your leader is. The idea that Trump is wrong just because it's Trump, no matter what he does, he's wrong.
Yeah.
You can't hold that mentality because that's something your enemy takes advantage of, is that you just don't like your president. So you're going to stand by whatever we do because, well, we're fighting on your behalf.
Well, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Jimmy Carter was president. And I thought he was a disaster. The first president I voted for was Reagan because of Jimmy Carter. But nobody hated the guy. They just thought he was in over his head and he was naive, and and a lot of people even say, well, he was a much better ex-president than he was a president, because he tried to do good things and he was generally a nice person. He was just a horrible president. But
Yeah.
you can't, no one on the left will give Trump any benefit of the doubt at all.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, if he
Yep.
could cure cancer, they're pro-cancer.
They're
And
pro-cancer.
he comes out against the mullahs in Iran. Now they're pro-mullah.
Yep.
And it's and to me, it's just it's like a psychosis. There's absolutely no
Without
logic
doubt,
whatsoever.
No. I was a Reaganite. I remember I was a Reaganite when Reagan took power. When Reagan took the presidency,
Yeah.
I was fully on board with Reaganomics and everything Reagan did, because he was the first true conservative leader that I'd seen in the U.S. I wasn't so much on the Bush bandwagon, because that former CIA director, I went, no way, forget it. I don't want the director of CIA as my president. But Reagan,
well, actually, in '76,
and
I was pro Ford over Reagan because I thought Reagan was a little too extreme. Of course, back then, you only got the news from the. Well, I was in high school, but you got what you got from the news, and the news had him. Oh, he's this extremist, sort of like they did to Goldwater. And then by the time I hit 18, and I went, okay, yeah, they're full of shit. He's saying the right things.
Yeah.
And that's when I got on the Reagan bandwagon.
Now Reagan was the bandwagon for me. That was when I decided that I was a Republican, and I started working on different campaigns. I worked on the Bush Quayle campaign. That was my first exposure to real politics in the U.S. when I worked on the Bush Quayle campaign.
Yeah.
There was never hatred. I mean, no matter how much of an idiot Dan Quayle was, nobody hated him.
Well, and it's like Dukakis. I was certainly not a Dukakis fan or a Mondale fan, but I didn't think they were just inherently evil people. I just thought they weren't very bright, or they were, basically socialists. And anyone who self-identifies as a socialist is basically retarded, because socialism has failed every time it's been tried. But it's like, invading Afghanistan. That's an IQ test. When you do it, you fail. Socialism, it's an IQ test. When you apply it, you've failed. And we failed the IQ test. And it's one thing to attack Afghanistan. We should have never invaded and stayed. We should have gone in, killed them, got out.
Yeah, there was no reason to be there for 20 years. That was a mistake. Afghanistan should have bombed. Game over. But what we've done, I mean, the foolishness of Biden in what he did in leaving all those weapons behind, the mistake that Trump made trusting Zalmay Khalilzad to negotiate the Doha agreement, where there are still annexes that no one's seen. And once you figure out those annexes, you're going to find out that the U.S. is committed to a lot of things in Afghanistan that they should have never committed to do. You have put terrorists in power there. You have put terrorists in power in Syria. Their simple goal is to return the favor that you gave them, occupying their country for 20 years. They want to do the same thing to you. That is why the infiltration has been the way it has into the U.S. of immigrants. The borders being left open. You've let them all in. Sleeper cells are everywhere.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to say this is going to happen in this window. My gut tells me second or third week of February are going to be is where this stuff is going to start to kick off. Because when you look at the progression of what's happening in the Middle East, and if the Trump administration decides to bomb Iran, it is going to escalate things very quickly. It's going to accelerate things very quickly. Because you're not going to see a lot of people that are getting funded by the IRGC sitting quietly after Iran is bombed.
No. And the IRGC is not going to give up power willingly. But I do wonder what would happen if the regime falls in Iran. If and if the IRG leadership takes their millions and just flees and goes to Russia, like Assad did, they take the money and run. Yeah, the country left behind is going to be a mess, but it still has oil and it can still recoup. But you just wonder what's going to happen with the international terrorism networks if Iran is no longer a player in funding. Of course, the way their economy is, if Iran gives you a bucket full of reals, it's like, yeah, what am I going to do with this? Buy a cup of coffee. They need access to hard foreign currency. And that's one of their problems right now, is because they can't get it.
Have you seen the video from the Dubai airport of containers with millions of dollars that Iranian generals were smuggling out of the country when they thought the U.S.
I've not seen it, but it does not surprise me. Somewhere they've got pallets of cash that we gave them, like morons. Yeah. But yeah, that didn't go to the public. It didn't go to propping up their currency. It went to lining their pockets. Yeah,
because we saw, I've seen 5 or 6 videos that were sent to us from people inside of the Dubai government of cartons, and I mean 4 feet tall, 6 feet wide, full of US dollars, 5 or 6 cartons in one room. Just videos of them showing that look how much money the Iranian generals are sending out of the country just in case the US decides to bomb. I don't think that even if the US bombs and the IRGC has to leave Iran, I don't think they're going to give up their axis of resistance. They're going to keep control.
Yeah,
Trump made a statement.
They'll try to undermine the government and the incoming government and do all that stuff as well. Iran's it's going to be a mess for them, and no matter what happens. But if they can get the generals to bail, and there's stuff starting to come out now, like you have the little rich kids of Iran. Rich kids everywhere do the same stupid shit. They get on the internet and they have videos of themselves with hot chicks in bikinis and Ferraris. Well, this is some kid whose dad is a general in the IRGC. Well, that's not going to go over too well with the people on the streets protesting, and it's probably not going to go over too well with the really diehard religious mullah types. It's like, wait a minute, why are you hanging out with a blonde bimbo or a brunette bimbo in a Ferrari? That's not very pious of you. And that kind of stuff can come back to bite them, and I hope it does. If it really kind of undermines their religious authority, if all their kids are living the high life with champagne and bimbos.
Yeah, but Jeff, I mean, the Saudi culture. I mean, the Saudis do the same thing in Saudi Arabia. They're very holy and they dress the way they're supposed to dress. But as soon as they leave the country, they're more American or more European than the Europeans are. I think it's the same case with the Iranians.
They drink more scotch than Scotland. The joke is once they leave Saudi airspace, the hijabs come off and the liquor comes out. But they're not on the street machine gunning their people and claiming they're doing it because Allah told them to.
Yeah, that's the big thing. I mean, IRGC, my read on the IRGC, and Trump made this statement the other day in the Oval Office. He said, if we had not killed Soleimani, we would not be able to do what we're doing right now. And I think he's dead on right, because Soleimani was the man who crafted the entire asymmetric warfare model for Iran. What we see in Venezuela, what we see in Lebanon, what we saw in Syria, what we see in Yemen, this was all Soleimani's creation, and it's still there. And Trump's admission the other day that if Soleimani was still alive, we would not be able to do what we'd be able to do, because Soleimani would probably have taken control of Iran at this point.
Yeah. Well,
my point in this is when the IRGC.
We should let Israel kill Khamenei.
Yeah.
There might be a different one in charge.
The problem I see,
Khamenei's been around for so long, everybody's used to him. If you put a new guy in, people are going, why should I listen to him?
37 years Khomeiни's been in power. 37 years. But my point is that even if you push,
Khamenei only lasted a few years, right? I mean, when did he die? He came in 79, but he died in the mid-80s.
Mid 80s. Yeah, I think he only spent 10 or 12 years in power.
Yeah,
And
he was an old man when he
this,
got in there.
Yep.
But
But
Khamenei's
my
been
point,
around for
Jeff,
a
is
long time.
even if you push the IRGC out of Iran and they move into other countries, it's kind of like the Taliban model. When you push the Taliban and Al-Qaeda out of Iran, out of Afghanistan, they moved into Iran, they moved into Pakistan. It didn't stop their fighting. They continued to carry on their warfare. My read on this is even if you push the IRGC out of Iran, no matter what country they go to, they will still keep operating their networks and they'll still keep carrying out their warfare, which
Yeah.
means that at some point they are going to activate their sleeper cells inside the United States.
Yes and no, because I think the loyalty, and I use that word very loosely, to the IRGC. I mean, people support the IRGC because the IRGC pays them. And when the IRGC loses access to essentially unlimited funds, everybody's a loyal employee till they miss a paycheck. And the thing is, the guys who smuggled hundreds of millions of dollars out of Iran for their own purposes aren't going to dip into their own savings to pay their minions. And so those minions will not be their minions very long.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, the Taliban, I think, was a little different because those guys never had a lot of money. If the Taliban gave you $10, that was a big deal. But these guys are expecting, okay, I'm supposed to be working for you. You're driving a Bentley, and I can't even put food on the table. So wait a minute. Well, why should I follow your orders?
Yeah, agreed. But my problem is that when you look at the Taliban, they were running a massive drug network. They were smuggling heroin, they were smuggling hashish into countries all over the world. But when you look at the IRGC's only point of leverage has been Iranian oil. And if they lose control of the Iranian oil, they lose control of all their funding.
Yeah, and they have Iranian businesses, but they'll lose those too.
Yeah, because once you've lost Iran, you've lost everything.
Yeah.
And then they have to leverage like the Hezbollah network. They have to leverage Unit 910 from the international side. IRGC doesn't make a lot of money abroad when you don't have Iran to work as your base.
No, they have no source of income outside of Iran.
Which is why I think that if you were to attack Iran, IRGC response would be almost immediate inside the U.S. The reason the IRGC made the threat they made against Trump when he said he was going to bomb Iran, it was to push back very quickly because even Israel said that we're not ready for an Iranian attack. If they were to start bombing us tomorrow, we're not ready. So let's not piss them off right now because we're not ready for them to come at us. And I think that was part of the off-ramp that Donald Trump took, was to back off of Iran, because Israel said, wait a minute, we're the ones that's going to take the brunt of this. You're going to lose 3 or 4 bases, but we're going to lose a country. We're going to get bombed. We're going to have to go to war. And we're not ready to go to war right now.
Yeah, it's going to be it's interesting to see what happens. It's like the curse. May you live in interesting times.
Yeah, and we are living in interesting times.
Yeah,
we are living in interesting times. But I do think, and I'm good, and this is more for the people in the comments that are asking the question about 9/11 2.0. I do think we're in that quiet window right now, where things have gotten very calm. We're not seeing any major moves because the insurgency that's happening inside the United States is exactly what the terrorists want. It's something that they can leverage and carry out what they want. The next 2 to 3 weeks, I'd be very careful. Situational awareness should be very high. Pay attention to what's going on around you, because any kind of movement can cause a opportunity for an attack of some kind. Even like Jeff and I were saying, that even if you were to plant one IED in the middle of these protesters and have that blow up, you have created a situation that puts this to war. And when you push this to war, you're going to see this explode very quickly. These cells are sitting inside the United States. They're waiting. They are ready. They just need the go ahead. And we were concerned when Pakistan started bombing Afghanistan. At that point, we were concerned because the Taliban had sent, the number we got was 150 suicide bombers into Pakistan with selected targets already. And we saw a couple bombs blow up inside of Pakistan as well. There's a lot of things that will affect this timeline, but we are now into that quiet window where things are not going on. If you look at Germany, if you look at Europe, things have gone very quiet. If you look at what's going on in the U.S., there's no talk about Islamic terrorism. All the talk is about the insurgency. So the focus is on the anti-ICE protesters. We need to be very careful right now. And the reason we need to be very careful is because things are shifting in the Middle East. There are a lot of moves to take over power. You've got Saudi Arabia fighting with the UAE. You have Somalia exploding. You have Somaliland. You have Iran as an issue. You have Syria as an issue. You don't know where this is going to start from. And our problem is the amount of money that ISIS now has, the amount of money that Al Qaeda now has and the Taliban now has. It makes it very easy to fund a big war inside the United States, whether you use the useful idiots or whether you activate your own sleeper cells. The problem right now is that you need to be aware. I can't stress it enough because the opportunity is there. With the number of protesters out on the streets, the number of conflicts that are happening, people that are now armed in the protest groups, it's shit waiting to hit the fan. It's not even, a possibility. It's literally shit waiting to hit the fan. That needs to be very carefully watched. I don't have a better way to saying it, but please watch your backs. The smallest thing can ignite a fire. And if that fire ignites, putting it out is going to be very difficult because once you get into TDS and you start capitalizing on this, then even the terrorists are your friends. Even the radical left is your friend because then you are looking at overthrowing the Trump regime. And once you start talking about overthrowing the Trump regime, you are looking at massive warfare. And the radical left will take advantage of it. The terrorists will take advantage of it. The Democrats will take advantage of it because that's how it works. And we're in that quiet period. We've been watching very carefully. Even here in Pakistan, we haven't seen a terrorist attack in, God, I would say almost a week and a half. Nothing has happened in Pakistan, which is very odd that we would not have an attack of some kind in this country. The other day, I shared on our X. I don't know how many people follow us on X. We shared a video of the type of training that the TTP was getting to invade Pakistan. If you have a look at that video and you see the level of complexity they're working from, you'll get a better understanding of what kind of complexity the sleeper cells inside the U.S. are preparing to attack inside the United States. There are too many distractions right now. And when you have distractions, you create opportunities. Those opportunities mean that shit can hit the fan very quickly. This is exactly what we were talking about with trigger events. We have trigger events happening, and someone's going to take advantage of them. Some idiot is going to take advantage of it. And once they take advantage, the reverse isn't there then. There is no reverse. You have to move forward from there. I can't explain it any more than that because there's a lot of things I cannot put on air. There's a lot of things I can't talk about because I can't put them out on air in public. But be forewarned, we're in that window right now of absolute quiet. And as long as there's absolute quiet, you are getting closer and closer to the main attack happening. Jeff, if you've got anything to add.
No, I think you covered it. I mean, everybody just needs to keep their head on a swivel because, if I was a terrorist group, I would take advantage of the mayhem that's currently going on in the country from Antifa and all these morons to disguise my actions.
Yeah, yeah. That's all we got for you tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night. We're gonna do an episode on Syria because the reason I'm cutting short, I mean, there's a lot going on in Syria right now. There's a lot of data we need to go through, a lot of intelligence we need to go through to figure out what's really happening and what's just being propaganda being pushed out. Tomorrow night we're going to talk about Syria. We will connect a lot more dots into what's going to happen with 9/11 based on what's going on in Syria. Again, when you watch what's going on in the Middle East, it'll give you a very clear picture of what's being planned to happen in the U.S. You're seeing when we saw what happened with the SDF and the Jolani terrorist army, you can see the kind of brutality that they're expecting. The slitting of throats, the number of stab wounds, the types of things going on. There are Syrian Telegram groups right now that are literally posting that you should go out and rape the Kurdish women and children. Um, that's very dangerous because we're headed back into that caliphate state. And if the caliphate is reestablished, then there is a bigger threat to the United States because Venezuela was a big piece of their puzzle. When they lost Venezuela, they're going to now push harder. They want revenge now. And we're watching very closely what's going on in Syria. For the past 2 days, I've been watching what's going on and following what's going on. I think I filled up two notebooks with all kinds of intelligence that we're seeing. Tomorrow night we'll go through Syria with clear picture of what's going on. I'm s- I know I'm missing something. Tuesday night when Chris is back, we're going to bring the conflicted question back, and hero of the day as well. Chris is at Shot Show. Um, for those of you who are Carnival fans, and I'm still waiting to get my Carnival, our discount code for Carnival is Eat Meat, and for Wasachi Wagyu, the code is SD20. Um, those of you who are in our Signal chat, and we're in the process of bringing you completely on board onto the Element server, and this is something that no one else has, their own dedicated communication network that cannot be censored, cannot be shut down, completely controlled by the SDN team. If you are a paid member, whether you are paying monthly or whether you're paying yearly, a lot of people miss the discount that Chris was running last week. If you're paying $7.99 a month or $79.99 a year, um, you'll get access to all of our Guardian groups. I think we're at 13 or 14 Guardian groups right now. You'll have access to our Survival Dispatch Network, which is the emergency network. If something happens, we alert you before anything comes out on the news. The one thing you'll find with what we do on the Survival Dispatch Network in our groups is that we will flesh out what is propaganda and give you what's really happening. Um, it's the biggest pitch I can make because right now, with everything happening, the Democrats will come back into power. Shit is going to hit the fan. Once that happens, a lot of things that we have access to right now, whether it be X, whether it be Substack, whether it be um, the different channels that we have for communications, those will all go down because once an attack happens, all these things are going to disappear. And we've seen it with the terror, with the networks collapsing, with the different cyber attacks. As long as we have the Element network of our own, you'll have access to all the information as it happens, as long as you have an internet connection. $7.99 a month, $79.99 a year. That is 2 months free. If you go to survivaldispatch.news or survivaldispatch.com, you can sign up there. Um, that's all we've got for tonight, and we'll be back with you tomorrow night. I'm sorry that I'm a little bit, shaky on the conversation. I've done a lot of talking tonight, but there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of intelligence we want to give out to you. There's a lot of things that we want you to know. But we will be back with you tomorrow. I will be back on track tomorrow, maybe with a little bit of sleep. Uh,
Get
so
some sleep,
like,
man. Get
share,
some sleep.
comment. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I think the next couple of days we're going to be wide awake watching what's going on in Syria. Thank you all for watching. We hope you're back with us tomorrow. And God bless America.
God bless.
Yeah, I am aroused. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November.
Armies gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Evil minds that love abortion, call it healthcare reproduction. In the streets, the flags are burning. American hearts are now discerning, projecting hatred to mankind. Lord, open their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord.